Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast giving America hope since 2018. I'm Ryan Coonerty. Along with Debbie Cox Bolton of the New Deal, I'm lucky enough to be your co-host. An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. The New Deal is an organization that supports the next generation of American leaders. From attorneys generals to state senators to mayors to school board members, these are the people that are pushing policies and politics that will respond to climate change, rebuild our economy, address racial injustice, and restore our democracy. These are incredibly talented people who have dedicated themselves to public service when their country and their communities needed it the most. Check out newdealleaders.org to see what I'm talking about. Oregon Senator Anthony Broadman represents Bend, Oregon, one of the most beautiful and fastest growing cities in the United States. It's a place that embodies so many of the opportunities and challenges that face our nation. It's politically divided, economically diverse, and subject to almost yearly climate-induced natural disasters. The senator is focused on navigating those issues with hard work, bipartisan leadership, and a focus on economic growth. Not easy things to do these days. As he blazes a trail for Oregon, perhaps we, as a country, can follow. Enjoy. Oregon Senator Anthony Broadman, welcome to An Honorable Profession.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me. I'm not used to that because I'm also an attorney, the honorable profession part of it. So I appreciate the warm welcome.
We're trying to make both. I'm an attorney as well, so we're just trying to keep everything honorable. Not an easy task these days.
Yeah, I mean, I would say attorney and policymaker are, two sides of the same coin, and both very honorable if you're doing them right.
Absolutely. Let's start with that. You represent this really interesting area in Oregon, which is it's rural, but one of the fastest growing places in the country. It's as purple as it gets. Can you talk to us a little bit about the state of Bend, the state of Oregon, and how you're trying to navigate these days of politics?
Yeah, Bend, Redmond Sisters, all of Deschutes County is it's a pretty magical place because it is so diverse politically. We've had obviously a lot of in-migration because it's a wonderful place to live and work and play. And coupled with, a resource economy that still exists and is an important part of our heritage and who we are. Navigating that has been sort of easy for me because it's part of who I am. I think we don't have the luxury of a lot of partisanship in Central Oregon because we're isolated. We're 3 hours from Portland, 2.5 hours from where I am right now in Salem, in the capital. And we have to get things done. We have to deliver. That's always been the way, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or a moderate or liberal or a conservative. That's the way that Central Oregon policymakers have always approached service. And, I'm just the inheritor of a legacy, I think, of that type of delivery.
You are the first Democrat to represent this seat, I think, in 40 years, and came up from the Bend City Council. Can you talk about your journey into politics and working through and delivering results for your constituents?
Yeah, my journey was, getting upset about a transportation issue. Like so many people, I think, you get frustrated with something happening in your community. Mine wasn't quite as exciting. It was transportation policy, but I did get involved with our local government when it came to doing some transportation planning. Prior to serving on city council, and I still represent tribes as an attorney, so I'm involved in government law, government policy making quite a bit. And this was just a natural way to serve my community in a different capacity, and it always felt natural to me. But I realized that I have that privilege, having been a lawyer for governments before. Council was great, and council trained me to be one type of public servant, which is somebody knocks on your door, and my wife's a physician, so they're either asking her to stitch their kid's foot up, or they're asking me why did the city put a ticket on my car for parking in the wrong direction. And that type of local focused service is really how I try to serve the 141,000 people that I serve now. We're there to deliver results. We're there because we are there to serve, not to necessarily tell people how and when to act. And, I learned that from being a city councilor, because you got to answer to your friends and your family and your neighbors every day in the supermarket, every day when you're at the Bend Elks game, every day when you're floating on the river here in Central Oregon. People are going to ask you, what are you doing for me? Why aren't you fixing this problem? Or how are you going to fix this problem?
You focused on transportation and housing in your time on the council, and have continued to do so in the state legislature. Can you talk us a little bit about how that work is translated from the local level to statewide?
Yeah, well, we have a pretty concerning budget gap right now on transportation, and for me, I'm one of the legislators who drives over a pass every single weekend to get home, and I see that. And so my focus in the legislature has been continuing to bring that rural voice, the voice of somebody outside of the Portland metro area or Eugene or Salem, that my commute, my economy, my public safety, people getting to school and work on time is affected by snow for a lot of the year. And making sure that we have sustainable transportation funding so that we can ensure our economy runs and that our communities are safe has been a big part of my work in my first year in the Senate. I'm still like a year and a month in. And I would say that that's going to be a significant area of work in the next year. My portfolio has expanded a little bit because now I'm the Senate Finance and Revenue Chair. So very focused on tax policy and making sure that we set the table for economic development in our state, and that we continue to fund the healthcare and the public safety and the education that Oregonians rely on.
Some of the cuts that have come out of Washington around the Big Beautiful Bill have really hit many states, but particularly Oregon hard. Can you talk about what that impact is and what it means for services to people in your state?
Yeah, the day after HR1 passed, the Trump administration and Congress blew a $900 million hole in Oregon's budget, because we're an income tax state largely, and we connect to the Internal Revenue Code for many of our tax policies. So we were profoundly affected by that cut and the impact that it had to our state budget. What it means on the ground? Well, it means that we look at the core services that our state provides and that people rely on in order to live prosperous, fruitful lives. That's public safety, education, healthcare. Where I live, that's acute because we see fire and smoke every single summer. I had the ability to last year pass the first sustainable wildfire prevention funding in the history of the state, with a new tax on oral nicotine pouches. And that, it's those kinds of tools that are helping us bridge the gap, even though the Trump administration blew this $1 billion hole in our budget next year. We aren't using that as an excuse to not deliver. When the waters get choppy, I think that's when you have to lean in. That's when you have to set aside the fear of scarcity and the fear of cuts and do things that are bold for families across our state. This year, that has meant investing in the earned income tax credit and actually expanding it by 5 percentage points in a time when a lot of governments are shrinking. Oregon, at least, we've passed the bill out of the Senate. We'll see how it does in the House. Oregon is investing in working families, investing in trying to support the folks who are suffering the most under this K-shaped economy that is resulting from HR1.
Can you talk about how you did that? I mean, I think a lot of folks, it feels like we're just constantly reacting to national politics. And you've been really engaged in trying to be proactive and lead from the values. Can you talk about how you did that, how you brought people along, how you dealt with the partisanship that's become such a part of our everyday politics?
Yeah, most of what we do is super bipartisan here. Oregon has a really beautiful history of that. Central Oregon in particular has just a ton of examples of working together, like we did on wildfire prevention. My bill last year it's not fully, but for the first time to fund wildfire prevention was bipartisan, even though it was a tax vote. I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of my Republican colleagues, my Democrat colleagues for working together and landing the plane on something that's going to deliver safer lives for Oregonians. the HR1 sort of response to that $900 million hole that's been blown in our budget is far more partisan. And it's more difficult because there is the sort of baggage that comes with President Trump's tax policies, which have made life more expensive. That's just math. And, I don't think we should shy away from that. But what it means is continuing to lead with our values. So for me, that means making sure that working families have more affordable lives. You do that with the earned income tax credit, which is a bipartisan tool. Paul Ryan and Elizabeth Warren both support the earned income tax credit. It's something that everybody seems to agree is helping to lift low and moderate income families up. So, leading with provisions of a revenue policy that people agree on, even if they don't agree on how you're going to fund it, I think is important. So we paired the increase in the earned income tax credit with a new jobs tax credit to lower taxes for businesses that are creating jobs in our state, as well as disconnecting from provisions of HR1, because our state did that automatically. That largely benefited out-of-state corporations and super wealthy corporations, but tools that are being used elsewhere because we are in a competition with other states. So in our state, that meant disconnecting from Section 168K bonus depreciation on machinery and equipment. That is a tool that half a dozen other states are also using because as we compete with businesses and industry and attracting people to invest in our state, we need to be mindful of the fact that we don't really want to stand out as an anti-business state. We want to make sure that we're setting the table for economic development in our state with good schools, with public safety, with great healthcare in order to grow the economy that is going to help support the services that we rely on.
Oregon's, it's traditionally been a blue state, but it has an independent streak, and especially Central Oregon. Can you talk about the politics on the ground in Oregon right now, and as we head into 2026, 2028, what those look like?
Yeah, I would say it's not unlike a lot of other areas where there's rural and urban communities living together and knowing that we rely on each other because we're isolated. That is, for me, the beauty of Central Oregon is that for good and for bad, we're on our own a lot of the time. When the pass is snowy, we know that we need to take care of each other there. And I think that helps us stay less partisan. At least I hope. Maybe that's naive, but that's the feeling that I have, in my community, my church, my Rotary Club. We can set those kinds of partisan differences aside because we are a little bit more remote. Obviously, that doesn't mean ignoring your values and ensuring that we're protecting all of the rich tapestry of our entire state. But it also means, we need to deliver on the core services that folks in our state expect from us. They need to see great value for their tax dollars. And at the end of the day, a safe community is going to be a prosperous community. I would say also Central Oregon has a history of legislators who, they're a Republican, but they will vote with the Democrats, or they're a Democrat and they will side with the Republican on particular issues when it comes to natural resources, when it comes to hunting and fishing, when it comes to investing in our transportation network, because I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, if the pass is closed because you didn't fund transportation, you're going to have a problem. Like I said, I'm lucky to be an inheritor of a legacy of legislators who have at times bucked their party when it's necessary.
You mentioned the isolation of Central Oregon, and one of the ways that can be life-threatening is through fires and other natural disasters. You've done a lot of work to fund and prepare for fire. Can you talk about the impact of climate change on your district and how you're preparing for a future of more intense storms, fires, and weather events?
Yeah, absolutely. Central Oregon is on the front line of climate chaos. There are weeks or months every single summer when we have smoke, and it's not necessarily just smoke from Central Oregon. It can be smoke that stays in Central Oregon because of our microclimate and our geography. And so it's real for us. It's real for businesses. And I would say it has helped give some general agreement when it comes to meeting the climate moment that we're in. when businesses are empty, when restaurants are empty, when we don't have tourists in our hotels, it shows. And when it is smoky, when the AQI outside is over 300 and kids can't play outside, it has real impactful damages on the climate. Fortunately, I think it's helped bring us together. I think that that's why you saw, in part, so much bipartisan support for fully funding or working to fully fund wildfire prevention funding. Shouldn't be partisan to be ready for the wildfires that we know are coming. We do that through landscape resiliency and community risk reduction, helping people make sure that their homes are ready for wildfires. I think a lot of that work has borne fruit. Even just this last year, we had the flat fire just north of my district, and within the perimeter of that fire, which traveled 23 miles, we had 800 homes that were saved because of landscape resilience and community risk reduction. So I go back to that delivering, right? What are we delivering for people? Climate can be a nebulous term for some, not for me. I'm very focused on what that means for me, but what it means for my community is that we are meeting the moment and saving 800 homes inside of the perimeter of that flat fire, as we call it here. So I think it's ensuring that we're talking about the real practical results of meeting the moment on climate chaos and what it's going to mean for saving people's homes, keeping insurance premiums down for home insurance, and making sure that our local public safety, our fire department, our rural fire departments are funded and ready to fight those fires when they come. And we know they're coming.
How did you bridge the maybe rural and urban divides? Fires disproportionately would impact your district, maybe not as much in around the metropolitan areas. How'd you bring people aboard and get support for your bill?
I think that was a case of people recognizing it from a budgetary perspective. It is so much more expensive to do suppression than it is to do mitigation, pre-fire mitigation. And I have some brilliant colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, who know that if we spend $1 on mitigation now, it's fiscally responsible. It's going to save us many times that dollar down the road. So often in this building, the money talks, and being fiscally responsible and planning for that rainy day in the future. In this case, we know it's that fire season that is going to inevitably cost us hundreds of millions of dollars. What can we invest in now that's going to save us money down the road? And I think that's why we saw such broad bipartisan support.
I'm wondering, we talked about your path from the Bend City Council to the State Senate. Another part of your experience is that representing tribes and working in the judicial system. Can you talk about how that experience? First of all, what have you done in that area? And then second, how does it inform your legislating when you're making decisions in the Capitol?
Yeah, I've spent my whole career as an attorney representing tribal governments. That's really, for my first week of practicing law. I'm practicing less law now than I was before, but it has always been serving tribal governments. And you can think of a couple of tribal chairwomen who have shown me, what it means to be a responsive leader. As a non-tribal lawyer working for tribes, I was a government lawyer, like so many other government lawyers, and had the opportunity to work for a lot of different governments and see what works and what doesn't. And what I love about working for tribes and working on reservation was that need to deliver. Often a tribal chairperson or tribal council member would be visited by somebody who needed something acutely, whether that was a behavioral health issue or an issue with a child or an issue with a down payment on a new home. And often that constituent might be related to that tribal chairperson or that tribal council person. And I think treating our constituents as if they are all relatives and treating our constituents as, the cousin or the daughter or the sibling that we would expect ourselves to be treated as by the leaders who we elect to serve us, has served the best tribal council people who I've worked for really well. And I like to think of, my district as a big network of people who I have an obligation to serve, just like those tribal chair people who I worked for in the past had an obligation to serve their people. I aspire to that. All of the good parts of what I learned from tribal leaders, I'm really grateful for that. And certainly none of my shortcomings as a senator are attributable to those lessons.
I love that, treating everyone like their family.
Yeah.
It can change the outcome of constituent response. It
helps at home too. My wife is, as a pediatrician, my wife is always lobbying me to ensure that we're thinking about healthy babies and moms and public health from the day that a baby comes home. So it actually helps me at home too, and with my 3 daughters who are passionate.
Awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious. You worked on tribal councils. You worked on a city council. This is your first term in the state senate. What's been surprising to you about this experience thus far?
I would say what's been surprising to me is, and this is not a criticism of any specific person, is how important it is to bring bipartisan policy forward is lost on some people outside of the building and people in this space, and how critical it is to my folks at home to see names of people from different parties on legislation, to see the names of people from different parties on specific funding initiatives or things that we are doing. And it takes time and it takes work and it takes relationships, but those are all things that we should all work toward. And I'm surprised sometimes when I look at other states that's not how it's being done. Obviously, there's great examples where that does occur, but that has been surprising to me. And I want to keep my focus on making sure that I'm setting party differences aside as much as I possibly can. Sometimes you can't, but when you can, it's really important to do that.
I guess, how do you do that in a political world that seems to really incentivize people to be as partisan as possible for fundraising, for press, for all the different ways that it gets rewarded in our system?
I'm a child of a broken home, so I had a Republican dad and a Democrat school teacher mom. I think my dad worked for Goldwater, and my mom, I remember, took me to a Dukakis rally at some point when I was a kid. So, there wasn't a lot of room for those types of fights at our dinner table. And I think it's just good fortune to have been raised and been around smart, loving Republicans and smart, loving Democrats. That's not always possible. I think it's good to go in and have hard fought policy debates on the floor of the Oregon State Senate, even when they're partisan. I think that can be healthy and good. But at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We're all Oregonians who love our state. And, I can look at everybody knowing that they have our state's values at heart.
Last question, which is, I guess I'm curious, you've spent a lot of time at working and advising in governments, but and now you're serving in one as an elected official. As you're trying to go learn the institution, move policy, go back and forth across the pass to get home, how do you set your priorities? How do you decide how you're going to spend your time, and how do you keep a balance to the extent you can in the midst of doing all that?
Yeah, tightly. I would say you have to be tightly focused. I mean, I had the luxury when I worked at a large firm, I billed by 0.1 of an hour.
Oh, wow.
And that type of meticulous timekeeping, I think early on in my career helped me be really focused. That's very lucky. But with my staff and my office, what we do is we know we can't prioritize everything. If you're prioritizing everything, you're prioritizing nothing. So we set out our goals, whether they are, we use that kind of Eisenhower framework. This is important. This is instantaneously important. Like it acutely needs to happen today. And then, move along that spectrum and try and prioritize. I mean, if I don't lead my staff and lead my team to focus on the most important things, then I know we're not going to accomplish those. There's not enough time. So I think prioritization is really important. And being meticulous with your effort and your time is really important. And there's a lot of things that that only I can do in my office. There's a lot of things that only my chief of staff can do in my office, and just making sure that we're clear about what that is really key to delivering.
Maybe we should put every legislator on billable hours. I
think we might get better results.
Yeah, I like that.
Report back to our constituents.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us today. We love having you as part of the New Deal Leaders Network. It is important that we get the representation like yourself from all different parts of this country, and I wish you the best of luck in navigating the Oregon's legislative session.
Thrilled to have been able to do this, and thanks for all your support.
An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. Thanks to the team at New Deal for producing this episode. We encourage you to bring honor to public service, and because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars are used in the making of this podcast.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.